This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. We're back again with our guest, Nic McGrue, another day. Again, I hope you listened to yesterday's segment where he covered a number of things that were very valuable. But today we are going to dive into this fund-to-fund model that I know I'm hearing more and more about, even working a little bit with broker dealers and financial advisors and some other things that came out that I wasn't expecting that were new information. But also even a software that he uses that I had not heard of before, but I'm excited to look at, and a number of things that he tracks that I know will be helpful for you. Nic, welcome back to the show. Honored to dive in again in another segment. I want the listeners to know, hey, we did a segment yesterday with Nic, and you need to go back and listen to it. I would say whether you're a active operator or whether you're passive, you need to understand some of these rules, even if you're passive, to ensure your operators doing these things legally, right? Or got good counsel on their team like Nic. And so, Nic, welcome back. Let's jump back in.
Yes, let's do it, man. I had a great time yesterday. I'm ready for some more.
Awesome. Well, let's do just that. I know recently, or for a number of years probably now, but I've heard more of this being done this way more recently, is this fund-to-fund model, right? People, instead of being the co-sponsor, which was the term everybody's used for a long time for capital raisers, right? And like you mentioned it yesterday, so, you would see, a general partnership team and it might have 50 people on there. And they're like, wait a minute, big red flag, right? There's no way all those people are active in that deal, or I would have a hard time believing that they are. And the SEC probably would as well, right? But so people create their own fund, right? So then they're just fund to fund and investing kind of like an LP then. Is that right? Yeah.
Correct.
But maybe speak to that. What is that a little bit? If somebody's ready to raise money, why should they have their own fund? Maybe some do's and don'ts there, why they should consider that versus being the old co-sponsor type.
Yeah. So I'd say one thing at the very beginning, when you're thinking about a fund, particularly if you're thinking about a fund where you're the operator, so not so much a fund of fund, but just a regular fund and you're raising capital for your deals. I often, and I never want to discourage anybody, but I often tell clients, if they don't have a bit of a track record, a fund is probably not going to be the thing for them. Because when you're doing a syndication, direct deals, you're saying, I'm investing in that apartment over there. And so your investors, of course, they're going to have to believe in you and they're putting a lot of faith and investment in you, but they can also just underwrite that asset. And they can say, yeah, this is a great corner in a great neighborhood. And Whitney would have to be insane to be able to mess this one up. So yeah, I'm going to invest in this. Whereas with a fund, now the investors are investing solely in you. And so they're looking for you to find that great corner in that great neighborhood. And they have no say. They don't know what it's going to be or where it's going to be. And so with that, at least for me as a passive investor, I'd say, okay, why should I be putting all my eggs in your basket? Show me how I know that you're going to protect my money. And really what I'm saying is, show me what you've done in the past that was successful so I can see if that's going to be potentially an indicator for the future. And so if you don't have a track record, then it's going to be, if you don't have a track record or a really strong dialed-in community, then it's just going to be really hard to raise money through the just regular direct fund model, because they're investing in you, and a savvy investor is going to be questioning, why should I invest with you, because you don't have the track record. So that's the big thing that I always say. If we're just talking about really any, especially a direct fund where I'm raising capital for my own deals. Whereas with a fund of fund, some people will create a fund and they say, hey, I'm going to raise capital for some of my deals and other people's deals. Or sometimes they might say, hey, I'm raising capital. I'm going to bring in money. And the whole purpose of my fund is we're going to take that money and invest in other people's deals. And so with that, you start taking on a whole lot more regulation. If we think regular securities laws are complex, when you get into the fund world, we add a whole lot more. Typically, for a syndication, a direct deal, we're primarily just dealing with the Securities Act. So there's a 33 and 34 Act, but it's the Securities Act, and that's primarily it. Whereas if we start doing funds, we got to work with the Securities Act. Then we also probably fall under the Investment Company Act. And then we also probably fall under the purview of the Investment Advisors Act as well. And so we're going to need to have either exemptions from all of those, or we'll have to register for some or all of those as well. So the fund structure does start getting a lot more complex from the regulatory side.
Okay. No, that's helpful to think through. What about if I if I am just going to partner, say, on one single asset, right? Or there's an operator I'm going to partner with, I'm going to raise money from my network. Would you still advise me to have my own, to create a fund just for that, even if it's just one deal? No doubt, if you're going to do a multi-asset fund, you need a track record, right? And you're going to be investing in a lot of different things. It's so much the relationship, like you said. And then, but if I already have the network and I can raise some capital, and there's an operator, I'm going to go partner on that one deal. Would you still recommend having a fund as opposed to just trying to get into the GP side of the deal?
Yes, in most cases, just because if you're trying to get into the GP side of the deal and your main or only contribution is raising the capital, if the SEC ever starts taking a look, you're going to have some issues and probably found to be in violation. Whereas with the fund of fund model, and that's the true fund of fund, is where you're saying, hey, I'm creating a securities vehicle and I've got Whitney's project and that's all we're investing in. So we're going to raise capital through my security vehicle and I'm going to take that capital and invest it in Whitney's project. That's kind of the specific fund of fund model. There you also, you don't need that track record necessarily, because you really are a conduit, so to speak, because you're not going to be the one that's making the decisions other than let me take this money and give it to Whitney. So you don't need the track record as much, but there is still some messaging you've got to do. A lot of times investors will say, well, why should I invest with you versus investing directly with Whitney? And so you're going to want to make sure you have answers to that. Sometimes the answer is, well, we have a lower minimum. I have some clients to where they might say, yes, a minimum $100,000 buy-in, but a fund of fund might say we've got a $25,000 buy-in. And so lower minimum might be it. Other times, depending on the structure of the lead sponsor, some of my clients, the higher the check, and we'll have multiple classes to where the higher the check you write, the higher the pref or the better carried interest you're getting or something like that. And so it might be $100,000 minimum, but that might get you a 6% pref and a 70-30 split. But if you come in at $1 million, you might get a 9% pref and, a 80-20 split or something like that. And so again, as the fund to fund, they can say, look, you can invest your $25,000 and you're going to get returns at that higher tier as if you had invested $1 million, even though you're not investing $1 million. And there could be other benefits that you have as well. So you would just want to make sure you're able to message as to the benefits of investing with you versus investing directly with the lead sponsor.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I appreciate you diving in there. It's just, I feel like it's becoming a more common thing, right? And more people are starting their own fund to do a number of different things, but yeah, appreciate that. What about something else I'm hearing more about is working with, say, a broker dealer or different financial advisors, and partnering some way. Can you speak to that relationship a little bit, or how that works, or how you've seen that done?
Yeah. So number one, disclose, particularly if we're doing finder's fees or commissions, we've got to disclose that, because your investors need to know that if they're giving you $100, all 100 of that is not going into an asset. So disclose if you're doing that for sure. But from there, it often ends up making the operator's life a lot easier, because one, a financial advisor or a broker dealer, they know this area, they're in this industry, and they also likely have a lot of contacts. So they're probably going to be able to help you a lot with your capital raising needs. Now with that, you're going to be compensating them. But unlike the other day when we were talking about finder's fees, if they're a licensed broker dealer, they have a license to sell securities for a commission, you can pay them the straight commission. And so, like I said, it makes your life a lot easier, because you can say, I'll give you 3%. And now you're not having money that's out there on the hook for results that don't come to fruition. That 3% only comes once you get the check, and then you cut a smaller check back to them. And so that's why I say if you can link up with them and they're wanting to work with you, it can make your life a lot easier because they have connections and you can pay them the commission. Additionally, they are highly regulated themselves. They've got their licenses that they've got to renew every year and disclose certain things. So you've got another partner. Now, they're not going to be looking out for your making sure that your stuff is done correctly on a securities perspective directly, but they've seen a lot. They're in this area. They can, have this smell it when they're like, something's a little off. Maybe you should look into that. And so you have kind of another set of eyes of somebody who really wants to be very compliant with the complex laws. And so that's another reason why I say that can definitely help the operator's job and make their lives a lot easier.
All right, Nick. Before we transition to a few final questions, I wanted to see, is there anything else you're seeing right now on the legal front or, the SEC side that maybe we haven't talked about that operators or passive investors should be aware of right now?
One thing that came to mind as we were talking is not so much on the SEC side, but just from a general legal perspective. I have never been the huge advocate of the being anonymous. I'm not against it, but I think that people put a lot more emphasis on that than its value. A lot of people say I should, do my LLC in Delaware or Wyoming because it's anonymous, and that's correct. And there are some benefits to that. But if somebody wants to find you, ultimately they could. If they want to spend the resources, they could find you. So another thing that's going to poke a hole in that anonymity a little bit is the Corporate Transparency Act. It was passed earlier this year, and it goes into effect at the beginning of 2024. While it's not going to put owners' information in a public database, it will be on a government database. So there at least will be another place where your information is out there. And generally what the Corporate Transparency Act says is that the owners of corporations and LLCs, there's a form, and you're gonna have to fill that out. So if I have, Acme LLC that's formed in Wyoming, which theoretically Nic McGrue would not be tied to that at all on any of the filings. Well, the Corporate Transparency Act says there's a document that I've got to file with the federal government that says, hey, Acme LLC, Nic McGrue is the president. This is where he lives. This is the vice president, et cetera. And so the government is definitely going to know who the owner of that LLC is now. And so that's one thing that I've been kind of counseling clients on more. Again, I've often thought that people put far too much emphasis on the anonymity. It's there and it can be helpful. It's just a hurdle, though, and anybody who's willing to jump over that hurdle can find it. And so this is another scenario where that anonymity is getting weakened a bit more.
Interesting. Okay, no, that's a good one to know. Is there anything we like as operators? Will we have to go back and do that for old entities, or is this just new entities that are created going forward? How does that work?
Definitely entities created forward, and then I believe it's kind of a periodic basis after that for older ones at a certain date. Don't quote me on that though.
Okay. And something else I've heard a lot of operators, especially operators that have a big name, right? Or, maybe they're all over social media, whatever. They built a really big following. Then they invest passively in a deal. And then that say that Schedule A is sent out to all the investors at times, right? I did a little research on that a long time ago, and it seems some attorneys do that and some don't. I don't really know if that's required or not. But what these operators didn't want is that all the investors in that deal to know that they also invested in that deal. So that's one place, they could have an entity name there instead of their own name. You're right. But wondered your thoughts on that.
So one thing that we do to actually try to help that anonymity, because that's something early on my clients were like, my investor is not going to want to be on here, because as an owner of an LLC, you typically are going to have the right to see kind of your place. How many units do you have versus other members, right, et cetera. And so what we do is for that kind of public, and I say public, it's available to the company members. We use membership IDs. And so Nic McGrue will have an internal membership ID that the operators have. But nobody will outside, unless I tell people, they won't know what my membership ID is. And so that way, when we send that document to investors, they can see all the various investors and how much they invested, what units they have, what class, et cetera. But they're not seeing that Nic McGrue just invested $1 million. It's, member 000123 has invested $1 million. So that's one thing that we do to try to help with the internal. It's the internal transparency or the internal anonymity regarding your co-LLC members.
Okay, I've not heard of that before. But that membership ID is created by you, not say the operators themselves.
Typically, the operators do it. Yeah.
Oh, the operator will do it. Okay.
Yeah, because the operators will have a list that says Nic McGrue is member 00123, Whitney is member 001234, et cetera. So the operators typically will create that, and then they have the list that corresponds the IDs to the actual people. But then when they have to give company-facing documents that's showing everybody, they show it based upon member IDs only.
Interesting. I've never heard of that. 1,800 some interviews. I've not heard of that. That's awesome. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. Well, Nick, we're going to jump to a few final questions here. Tell us a way that you've recently improved your business that we could apply to ours.
Great question. A recent way I've recently improved my business. So one thing that we've software that we've started using, and there's other ones like this. One that use is called Suite Process, but basically we're building we have a lot of SOPs and procedures and processes and walkthroughs and things like that. This kind of makes it like a company-based wiki. So somebody could type in, I need to get an EIN. And we'll have a step-by-step. We'll have it'll have the step-by-step walkthroughs. It'll have Loom videos that show somebody walking through doing it. It'll have maybe Q&A variations, from issues that come, etc. And so as I've been growing the firm, and like the first decade, everything was in here. So in these past couple of years, I'm like, wait, it doesn't work with everything in here. We got to get it out. And so I tell everybody on the team, I say, look, anything that you do, if it's not in Suite Process, you got to put it in there because everybody needs to be replaceable. And it's not that we're trying to replace anybody, but if you want a promotion, somebody's going to have to replace you, which means we're going to have to know all the things that you do and have a walkthrough and a process and everything of what you do. So Suite Process, that's what we've used. That's been helping us a lot as I've been hiring new people. I was actually very happy because my latest hire, she's like, yeah, it's very helpful. Like, everything was very clear. And I was like, man, little does she know. But
Yeah.
But the growth and improvement as an entrepreneur, that's really all you're striving for is continual growth, improvement, refinement, etc. So
Love that recommendation. Yeah, Suite Process. I've not heard of that technology either. And with something we've tried to do as well, we've just been storing stuff like in a Google Drive and it's organizers and index. But something like that, especially if they can search, or whatnot, that seems really handy for the whole team. Any ways you're holding the team accountable for that? Like you need to get these many processes into Suite Process, or I don't know, any way that you're encouraging them to get all the things they do into the system.
Well, I did say, I said, look, if I've hired you, it's because I think you've got a lot of skills and assets that are great for us, and I want you to grow with the firm. And I did say, that's like, you can't, if we don't know all that you're doing and have a walkthrough of all that, then nobody can come and replace you. And so there's not going to be a promotion. Now, if I had to, and we're in the position, I'd promote them if I needed to. But that's one of the motivators that I say, look, you want to make yourself replaceable, and the better outline, better process, better documented that we have what you're doing, the easier it is going to be to replace you.
Love that. What's your best advice for passive investors right now?
Best advice, I think right in this state of the market, I say really do your due diligence on both the operator and just the market and the asset that you're investing in. Really do your due diligence. We're in a stage where it takes actual operators, not people that are excited and got in. And I'm happy for the ones that have done that in the past couple of years, and it's been okay. And the market saved them. We're at a place where the market's not going to save people anymore, and we're starting to see headlines of that happening. And so I say, really do your due diligence both on the operator and on the asset itself. And particularly when you're talking about the operator, I would, part of your due diligence should be asking questions. And so one of the big questions I would ask is, show me deals that have gone wrong or started to go wrong in the past, and what did you do to correct, or how did you mitigate that? And then I'd also ask, we know the market right now is not what it was in the past 5-8 years. And most things are saying that there's going to be problems. What are you doing to get ahead of that? What are you doing to mitigate that? And then seeing kind of how I'm feeling from their answers and responses to that.
For sure. That's great advice. Do you have any thoughts, or I know nobody has a crystal ball, but like any thoughts on what's going to happen in the next 6-12 months or ideas?
Yeah, so I'll lead with the caveat that I don't wish ill on anybody.
Right.
But I think a lot of the writing on the wall is to show that there's probably going to be a lot of deals that are going sour and going wayside. And unfortunately, a lot of investors typically the investors are going to be the last ones paid, if paid at all. And so there are going to be a lot of people that might get hurt a little bit from investments. Hopefully they were, understood this going in so that they're kind of prepared for it and it wasn't money that they couldn't lose. But with that, there's also going to be a lot of new opportunities because I've had clients already getting sponsors asking them, "Hey, do you want to buy this out, or what can you do to try to where we can even just give our investors their capital back, not even necessarily give them a gain." And in doing that, it presents opportunities for people to get into deals at much more favorable rates. And also with that, a lot of the deals in the past couple of years have, I mean, they worked because the market was there, but even people getting into it were like, this is ridiculous. This is too high. And so now the market's correcting. And so with some of these downturns, unfortunately, it'll allow people opportunities to get in at much more favorable and reasonable terms into deals.
Do you see a lot of clients starting like rescue capital funds now so they can go take advantage of some of those deals? Or
I've had a few clients start that, and I've definitely been hearing that term a whole lot more. Yes, a whole lot more.
I have too. Nic, what are some of the most important metrics that you track? It could be personally or professionally.
Personal metrics, sleep is one.
How do you track it?
I have a like a watch. No, it's not a watch, but it's a sleep tracker that a wearable. So a sleep is one. Mindfulness is another one, whether it's meditation, or I count stretching as mindfulness as well, or also a walk with no music, but something to where I'm not overly stimulated, just because throughout the day I have lots of stimulations and I need to take that down. So yeah, personal, I'd say sleep, mindfulness, food, tracking food and water. On the business front, obviously revenue is a big one, but also one that I'm trying to improve is number of leads, and then also lead conversion as well. So those are things that I'm tracking, and kind of just getting into the more entrepreneur thing. That's one thing that this year has been a lot of, the last 2 years was just starting to get the stuff out of my head and to hire a team and grow. And then as I was doing that, there's a lot of things just going. And I said, wait, we need to actually figure out, now that there's, other people doing stuff and I don't know everything, we've got to have ways to track this. And so there's still a lot of areas where I'm working on systems to track them, but tracking in the areas that I do track, it helps a lot just because you're able to make database decisions instead of I feel this, I feel that, I think this. And because a lot of times once I start tracking, I realized that what I felt or thought wasn't necessarily the reality of what was going on. So tracking is huge. And that's definitely an area in my business that we're working on and trying to grow a lot.
How do you track the leads and conversions? Or do you have CRM that's doing that for you?
That's one thing we're working on. We've tried a couple of CRMs and are looking for more. The ones that we've tried just didn't work. We'd have to just redo a lot of our other processes. So we couldn't get them to integrate into our system well. So right now it's kind of ClickUp is our project management software. And within that, we kind of have a CRM-ish kind of thing going on until we can get an actual CRM.
Any habits that you're disciplined about that have produced a higher return for you?
Habits that have produced a higher return?
Like you'd say, man, I have to do these things every day, or, this is what's helped me to be productive, or anything like that.
Getting up earlier. Earlier in this year, I started taking a mindset course. And one of the things he said is like, get up at 5 a.m. And he's like, it's not one of those like get up at 5 a.m. and, do all this stuff and everything. He's like, just get up earlier. And so I do get up usually at 5:30. And what allows me to, do that meditation, go on that walk, work out, or just get ready and ease into my day. And even when I do that, I still usually have like maybe an hour or so before the team starts emailing and clients start emailing. So you have some of that quiet time. You've gotten your day, you've gotten your little bit of your me time, you've gotten ready, and then you have a little time to do actual work before all the continuous interruptions and distractions start coming in.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I was not always a morning person, but a number of years ago, I started getting up at 5 most mornings and just having a structured morning routine, right? And that has paid forward in so many ways. Read so many more books than I ever would have read. Not doing that. Learned so much by having that structure. And people say, oh, I'm not a morning person. And I'm like, well, okay, I wasn't either. I didn't think I was, right? But now I love that time. My wife and I both, it's time for us to just have quiet time together too, and read and sometimes discussions, right? Just needed discussions before kids are up and the day kind of takes hold, right? Nic, what would you say is the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Fortitude. Keep going. That's what it is. There's many times, many times that I wanted to stop. Even now, when things are good and the business is fine, I'm not. There's no business use, just growing. There's even still times where you're like, man, I want to stop. But yeah, just keep going. I think I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship. You're constantly fixing problems, constantly iterating. And when you finally think you're kind of going, and you're like, cool, I got this going good. Things are running well. Then some other area of the business that you hadn't been paying as much attention to breaks, and now you're focusing on that and get that going. So all of that, especially when you feel like you're doing well, and then something comes and pulls you down, you're like, makes you want to stop. And a lot of people do stop, but really, I think the key to a successful business is just continuing to go. Because if you have the ability to keep going, you're going to keep iterating, keep trying things out, and eventually you'll find that one that clicks. And so, yeah, I think even for my success, because there were many times where I wanted to stop, but continuing is what made it. Because yeah, if you had to ask me, the firm celebrated the 13th birthday a couple of weeks ago, and if you had to ask me 13 years ago if I would be here, or even more so, how I would get here, the way I got here, not at all the way that I would have thought would have gotten here. So just keep going, keep pushing, take those failures as a lesson and a way to not do it, and use it as a way for you to continue moving forward.
Awesome. Nic, how do you like to give back?
I give back with my time. I like to mentor young entrepreneurs, people that are interested in going into business or even law. And, if they're going in business, like, I'll work with them, give them, offload all the information that I have. For young budding lawyers, trying to just tell them about all the, it gets better. It's going to be good. It's going to be worth it, even though it doesn't feel like it right now, because I know in law school, it definitely doesn't feel like it. But yeah, I really like, I like kind of bringing in the younger generation, because I just remember all the mental stuff that I had when I was at that stage. And I wish I had somebody that could say, yeah, I was right there. I felt that exact same thing. And look at me now. It's just time. It's all this time, and continuing doing it is really the key to the success. So I really like mentoring younger people that are in the business and legal areas.
Love that. So many people help pull me up. I want to do the same, right? Along the way. So Nic, appreciate your time again. Thank you so much. Even in this segment, you've added so much value to the listeners and myself, walking through the fund-to-fund models and working with broker dealers and financial advisors, even that Corporate Transparency Act. That was it was a good conversation around that, and some of those things around the membership IDs and some of those ideas that I've not heard of before. So appreciate that. Even the software recommendation of the suite process and a number of things that you track that I think, if most of us track those things, we'd be doing better a month from now, if not even sooner. Nic, thank you again. How can the listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, you can reach us at polymathlegal.com. That's POLYMATHLEGAL.com. Or find me on all the socials. It's at Nic the Lawyer. That's Nic with no K. So at NIC the Lawyer.
Awesome. That's a wrap, Nic. That's the end of the show. Yeah. Again, another great segment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, these were good. Thanks. I liked it.
Awesome. Is there any way I can add value to you, Nic?
If you have people that are either having questions or looking for a securities attorney, we'd love to meet with them and see if we're a good fit.
Yeah, no, I often am, or just people getting in the business, hear the show or listen to the show and reach out often, and ask about things like that. I can't, I can't believe I didn't know you before now.
I've seen your name. I think, didn't you speak, or were you on a panel at Best Ever last year?
I was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I heard your name before that too, but yeah, I was at Best Ever this past one. Actually, the past 2 years I've been at Best Ever too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, I've known Joe a long time. I think I've been at all the Best Evers except the very first one. And so, but we had a booth there this past year as well. And and I was on a panel. Also, or I was on the Shark Tank thing. So
yeah, I thought so. Yeah, that's what it was.
But no.
So Venus is one of my good clients too. And
good
friend. Yeah.
Good. That's fun. Well, awesome. Well, again, if I can help in the future, don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm also happy to have you back on the show sometime in the future as well. Or maybe if there's something that. What I've had, or some other attorneys have done, they've reached out and said, "Hey, Whitney, I've got a lot of questions about this. We should do a show about it." And so then it creates good content for us and for them, as well. So if there's ever anything like that you're like, okay, this would be a great thing to cover, just reach out and let's do it.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, pleasure to meet you.
You too. Thanks.
All right.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Nick. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.